You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey vet rehabbers, now this is a topic, it comes up often and it's one that needs more attention in my opinion. It's happened to me and to many of our colleagues, and the more we speak about it, the more we can help others to recognize it before it becomes a chronic problem in their lives. Dr. Tanya Grantham speaks to me today about burnout. She shares her first-hand experiences with it and how it's led her to research more and more into the topic in the hope to prevent a recurrence for herself, but also to create a practice that protects her team from burnout too. Before we head over to that chat, if you are looking for some online learning, we have the following current webinars in our free limited access membership. We have Diagnosis and Non-Surgical Management of Digit Injuries in Dogs by Jennifer Brown, Gait Assessment and Canine Hydrotherapy Patients by Amy King, and How TAC Influences Movement by Lauren Bergbeck. Now, in our free limited access membership, we change these every few months, and this is just a snippet of what's available in our paid platform. So in the paid small animal membership, we have now 210 hours in our library, in the hydrotherapy membership, 105 hours, and in our equine membership, 144 hours. If you'd like to have a checkout of those free webinars, you can go to onlinepethealth.com/free to sign up. Now, with all of these webinars, with the click of a button, you can download your CPD certificate. We advise you to take a screenshot and post it on social media, tag Online Pet Health. Sharing with your audience that you are learning and growing helps to increase your credibility. It makes your clients feel that you're on top of your game and that their pets or horses are getting the latest up-to-date treatment. So let's head over to that chat about burnout with Tanya Grantham. Hey, Tanya, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Megs. Once again, we meet and let's hope this is a really good discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
I actually can't remember how many times you've been on now. Do you know?
No, I'm not counting, but each one is fun and I hope fruitful and gets good info out there.
Yeah, it must be at least 5 times now, I think. So it's great to have you back. For the listeners that haven't maybe listened to our past podcast, can you tell them about yourself? And then let's introduce our topic and just tell us your experience of burnout.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tanya Grantham. I'm a vet. I graduated a very long time ago. I moved into the vet rehabber space in the mid-2000s, so around about 2006, 2007, and have moved my business over completely from standard veterinary care into the veterinary rehabbers realm. And I, both as a veterinarian and as a rehabber, I have been touched by burnout or adrenal fatigue. It comes with a lot of names. And I think my journey has been such that there are gems there that I think we're all susceptible to burnout. And I would like to explore some of those, some of the causes and some of the ways in which we can actually help ourselves to not be a victim of burnout.
Yeah, because I think with burnout, the important thing is actually to recognize that you're going down that path. Because if you only work out later, then there's so much more work that you need to do. But if you can pick up on maybe some of the signs that something's not right and then address it straight away, I think really that you can sort of decrease that downward spiral. Because I think about myself when I had burnout, and I probably wasn't in full burnout, but there was something definitely not right with me. It took me quite a while to get right again. And, I hope that this conversation creates awareness for people that this is something that's real. It happens. It happens to virtually everyone. And if you don't protect yourself, this is going to be your fate. You're going to get into the situation of burnout. Yeah. And I think, for me, I really want us to recognize this and maybe put systems into place for yourself. And if you've got people that work for you, for them, so actually this is something is very real in our profession.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I don't want to lose focus in terms of, I'm a vet Vets have very high burnout rates, but I think that is true for every veterinary professional. So whether we're looking at veterinary nurses or in the United States, the veterinary technicians, whether it's veterinary physiotherapists or vet rehabbers, we're drawn to the profession because we care. And like burnout is not only in the veterinary professions, it can occur with anyone, but I think we are particularly susceptible because of the nature of the person that is drawn to the work that we do.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's dive into actually what burnout is.
Okay, so burnout really is a physical, mental, and an emotional exhaustion that's caused by very long-term situations that are very demanding. I mean, we can get a bit technical and go, if we look at our body systems, everybody knows about the fight or flight response, and it's been extended, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or whatever. But in a nutshell, that system was designed to get us out of danger and for us to survive. And what's happening now is we move from the first phase into the second phase, which allows us to escape or to overcome. But now we're moving into a third phase, which is exhaustion. And we were never meant to be there. So our cortisol levels in our body stay high. And as a result of that, we never go into, so we all know about the autonomic nervous system, which is the sympathetic, and that's your fight or flight. But the balance is the parasympathetic. And our body wants homeostasis. Our body wants balance. And if we never allow the parasympathetic, which is the rest, relaxation, the digest, then we end up in burnout. We end up in fatigue and exhaustion because we've never rejuvenated, recuperated, regenerated the body or allowed it to go into that state. So as I said earlier, like, it's not unique to veterinary professionals. Anyone who is exposed to chronic stress, however that looks for you, will be susceptible to burnout.
Yeah, and then what does burnout look like? So how does it present?
It can present as depression. In our situation, you could find compassion fatigue. So we stop caring. We stop caring for ourselves. We become lethargic. Our mental capacity reduces. So, we could remember everything and the information was at our fingertips. And now we find we've got this brain fog and haze, and it'll be different for everyone, but really there's a lack of performance. There's a lack of joy. There's a lack of enthusiasm for life. And there can be a lot of physical symptoms. So we can be painful, like muscular aches, a general inability to do the things that we used to do. And as vet rehabbers or anyone in the veterinary professions, our job is really physical. If we're in private practice, our job is physical. So you may notice, you just can't see those 6 patients in the morning anymore because you don't have the physical capacity. Why are you so down? And our diets also suffer. So because we are stressed or we don't care, then we don't eat properly. And so we go into a spiral. So the symptoms are, you can read them, access them anywhere online. But my own experience really was mental fog and lots of physical inability. I'd lost my capabilities.
So for you personally, did you have pain?
I had all over body aches. Yeah. Which I couldn't pinpoint into anything specific. It wasn't like, I tore a calf muscle or I was running and going to the gym and pushing weights and injured my shoulder. There was none of that. It was very, very non-specific and very frustrating because your brain then tells you, you're just imagining it. There's nothing really going on. And I think the turning point for me came, I've got stairs in my house and I was halfway up the stairs and I nearly fell over. So I became very faint. My heart was pounding. It was like almost wanted to beat out my chest. Coupled with the muscular difficulty of actually climbing those stairs. And that was the day I realized, and my hair was falling out. That was the day I realized, actually, I really am in trouble.
Sure.
And then it was far advanced. It wasn't just, I'm don't worry, sleep for a week and you'll be fine. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, I think like you say, it presents so differently for everybody. So for me, it was actually when I first started my vet rehab practice. I was working for a veterinary practice, and I started my vet rehab practice where I was actually treating horses at that stage. And I was doing that after hours. So if I finished on that, one day, and when you work in vet practice where they call it a half day, where you finish at 4:30. Yeah. I remember used to say to my boss, I was like, this is not a half day. 4:30 is like when normal people finish. And he'll be like, tomorrow's your half day where you finish at 4:30. So at 4:30, then I would go to the stables and treat horses. And then Saturday, if I wasn't working, Saturdays and Sundays, I would be treating horses. And if I was working Saturday morning, it would be Saturday afternoon. So I was literally just burning the candle at both ends. And I was at a very busy 2-man practice. And my boss had some serious migraines. And he was in and out of hospital. So I was solely running a 2-man practice. So consulting, doing ops, like it was just absolutely crazy. And I only realized probably there was a problem. It literally came on suddenly. It wasn't like something's not right. I remember I sat down to have some breakfast and I had some cereal and I poured the milk into my cereal and the milk was off. And as I tasted it, I just could not handle it. And I burst into tears. And I remember my boyfriend at the time was like, are you okay? Like, I was like, the milk is off, And he was like, oh, well, don't worry. Like, I'm sure we've got more. And we didn't have more. And so that I was just completely devastated. And then I was like, whoa, that was like weird, whatever happened there. Anyway, I went to work. And I remember I was doing some x-rays, and that was back in the day where we never had digital x-rays, right? Mm-hmm. We had the ones where you had to go in and you had to, we had one of those ones where you had to develop them. So you had to put them in and time them and rinse them and then do everything. Only the people that have been in veterinary for a long time will remember this. I mean, it is so much better now with digital x-rays. But anyway, so it was already a mission. So when you did an x-ray, if you didn't position the dog right, and I remember I was doing some hip dysplasia x-rays to send off to ornithopeds. If you didn't do the positioning right, then when you developed the x-ray that took for however long, you had to look at it. Now it's the wrong positioning. You had to do the whole thing again. And so I think I maybe did it like 3 times. And I am like a perfectionist, so everything has to be perfect. I will not send an x-ray that is not exactly lined up, exactly how it should be to ornithopeds. And I remember on the 3rd time, I saw the developed x-ray and I just burst into tears once again. I was just like, and I remember the nurse just like, it's okay, it's all right, like we'll get it right this next time. And like that is like so like not me. Like I can handle stress. I mean, I can handle that kind of stuff. I don't let little things like that faze me normally. And that was for me just this bursting into tears, just completely overwhelmed with things and not being able to handle things. Those were the first signs for me. And I think afterwards, I actually went to the doctor. I said, there's something seriously wrong with me. Like I'm bursting into tears. And he just said, you've got burnout. Like we discussed it. And I remember he just said, you need to take 2 weeks off and just go do some fun things and you should be okay. And luckily I was. After about 3 or 4 days, stopped crying. And, I think after a week I went back to work. And so, I mean, but looking back, actually, as you're discussing, maybe not feeling good and the brain fog and all of that, I think in hindsight, there were other signs that I maybe just put to, you're tired or, just didn't really take notice of. My body had to burst into tears for me to actually say, Megan, you're not good. It had to show. It had to give me a massive sign to give me the wake up that I was heading down a really, really bad path.
Yeah. I mean, now that you're speaking, certainly my emotional state was very fragile. And I also, the things that happen, the little things that normally are nothing, that trigger your tears and sometimes for me anger. It's completely out of proportion to what has just happened. So I think that's definitely a trigger or a sign. And of course, the more we know ourselves and the more we know what or how we respond, and the more we take notice and we allow ourselves the time to look after ourselves and to listen, the less likely it is that we'll get to that end stage. So, we do pay attention to you. You are whoever you are, you're precious, you're special, and you deserve the downtime.
Yeah, and we need it because of the work that we do. I mean, it's intense. We have intense owners. I mean, there's another component we can chat about. But I just also remembered one other symptom, which I think that some other people might relate to this, that I remember actually also that had happened to me. And this actually happened on the Friday before I had my teary moments. And I remember it was about 5:45 or so in the evening, and I think it might have been later. I think it was like literally at closing time. We were supposed to close, and I remember thinking, great, I'm going to be able to get home, just like have a chilled evening at home on a Friday night. And I got this phone call from a lady, and she said, my dog is like scratching at his ear like crazy. And normally my feelings around that would be like, I'd feel sorry for the animal, and I think that animal can't be suffering if it's got an ear infection or something stuck in its ear. It's going to have an absolutely dreadful night. And my thoughts would be care and just bring the dog straight down. And I remember thinking, I just said to him, just bring the dog in. But my thought process was one of irritation. And I was irritated with that dog for having an ear infection, which is just completely not like me at all. My thoughts are always care, no matter whether it was 7 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, your thoughts are like, this animal needs my help and I need to help. And I remember at that time thinking, that's strange. That's a weird response that I've given. And that may be something that other veterinary professionals might pick up on. Maybe you start to not actually care as much. It's not that you don't care, your body you just can't anymore.
Yeah.
That was probably another symptom for me.
Yeah. And maybe even bordering on some compassion fatigue, because my understanding of compassion fatigue is it comes as a result of your tiredness and your constant exposure to the emotional upheavals that we are exposed to on every level, not just the animals, but the person's emotional distress, the client's emotional distress. So and then we feel less, or we are less able to respond as we would normally respond.
Yeah. So I mean, compassion fatigue and burnout, they're different things, right?
Yeah.
They can occur together, but they can also occur apart, separately.
They can. When I started reading all about this as well and trying to get a little bit more insight, in my brain, it almost feels like compassion fatigue happens after burnout. I don't know whether they happen separately, but I don't think that that's even relevant. They are definitely different states of being, and not pleasant ones.
But I think in our field often could be connected, because when you're burnt out, it's very difficult to be compassionate, right? And to care. You're just trying to survive. So So let's chat about why and when burnout would happen.
Okay. There are a number of risk factors and contributing factors to burnout. So in the veterinary profession specifically, because those figures are available, so they're not available for vet rehabbers. Definitely new graduates. So think about your stress levels when you come out of vet school or out of college, and now you have to take on the responsibilities of a job, or sometimes even your own business. Then you are particularly susceptible, because you were burning the candle at both ends. So you're under a lot of stress. It looks like in the veterinary field, small animal practitioners are more at risk than large animal practitioners and people in private practice. So if you are in a state facility or academia, less of a risk. I think you're not as exposed to pet parents and the traumas that come with that. Women particularly susceptible to burnout. And again, we are the feminine aspect is the caring aspect. So I think that definitely impacts on us. And then the higher your responsibility. So veterinary practice owners definitely had a higher rate than an employee, but it wasn't only happening to practice owners. I mean, it happens across the board. So, and then we look at things like long hours, the risk, the contributing factors, long hours, not being enabled, not being able to even speak your truth or say what you think. That's a whole, like, are you given tea and lunch breaks? Do you have time out? Are you respected within your workspace? Are there allowances made for you as a person? Because I think sometimes, and that's not only the employer, but the public also, if I think about the people that come in to see me, well, they're only concerned about their dog. And they don't get to see that, okay, your dog is now the 10th dog I'm seeing today. And actually, I haven't had a break and I haven't had any food and I haven't been able to just gather my thoughts for, 5 minutes. So those factors that increase stress will increase the risk of burnout.
Yeah, do you know what's so interesting? Like you were talking about having a lunch break. It's sort of in veterinary, in the veterinary world, I mean, definitely within veterinary practice, it's not like as a vet, wherever I've worked, you don't get a lunch break, do you? I mean, there's no like you sit down and you have an hour lunch. Like I've never had that before. I mean, it's always just been whatever work is needed to be done, it gets done. And if there is no time, there is no lunch. You literally just eat on the run. And that's just accepted and normal for veterinary practice. Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether things have changed now because I haven't worked in a normal veterinary practice for a very long time. And maybe things are different now. But in my day as working as a vet, it was just accepted. Like you just work. And I can remember, the practice that I worked in Cape Town, and even a toilet break was a luxury, you literally just were flat out. And I can remember, consulting in the morning, doing operations. And I can remember still literally stitching up my last op, and the afternoon's consults were just piling into the consult room. And I literally you just didn't have a break. And then you'd go on and then you'd get to 6 o'clock when you're supposed to go home. And then an emergency came in and you just carried on until 9 o'clock, and that's just normal and accepted. But the problem is that now we have a whole generation of vets that are working like that are now actually starting to suffer the consequences of it. And it's a problem worldwide where vets are really, really struggling. And I think that COVID has fast-tracked that a little bit because the pressures on people during COVID, because they had to do curbside or whatever, that meant that they had a whole lot more time was needed in order to be able to treat a patient. It wasn't so as quick in and out. And I think that put a lot of pressure on vets and veterinary professionals. And now we have a lot of veterinary professionals leaving the field. And so we have less vets. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen, I've definitely seen it in the States. And recently I actually saw an article here in South Africa that we have a veterinary shortage now. We don't have enough vets. Because, and maybe it's because people it's just too much. It's too much to be able to handle those type of hours and those type of circumstances to work in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, it was just accepted for us to carry on. And yet both of us suffered from burnout.
Yeah.
So it might be the norm, but I don't think it's a healthy norm.
No.
And more, we should be discussing, okay, how do we turn it around? And it is intensified by the world shortage of vets. It's a problem, and it's a very big problem here in South Africa. So how do we have conversations about changing the mindset and changing the way in which we practice? Because it's not serving us. It's not serving the veterinary profession. And, you know, I look at some of the young vet rehabbers that I come into contact with, and they're also burning the candle at both ends. You know, they're eating lunch on the run in the car to the next patient. Many of them have families. What happens when they get home or they rush to pick up the kids, then they drop them off and go and see 2 more patients, come back. You know, those situations, while they might be normal, are not healthy. And we should be looking at, how do we change that? What measures can we put into place that stop this hamster wheel existence that we find ourselves on?
Yeah, because it's not sustainable.
No,
I mean,
we're seeing that. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. And for the vet rehabbers out there that have got practices, you know, maybe you're identifying with this. Maybe, as Tanya's saying, you're that person who is just eating on the run. You know, you need to put some boundaries in place, you know, and say, this is what I am able to do in a day, and I can't do more than that, you know, and boundaries for our clients often, you know, because I mean, if I think about it, you know, it's our own personal thing where we struggle to say no. I mean, I was that vet rehabber where I could not say no to anybody. And if an owner phoned and said, my dog is in pain, I would just say, just calm down. I'll find a way to see you. And, you know, in vet rehab practice, you know, I speak about in vet practice, but I mean, I had times where I was bordering on burnout, and I identified that this is not, I can't carry on like this, but yet I still did it. You know, I can remember at one stage having 3 or 4 patients at once, you know, doing acupuncture, running from room to room, not having lunch breaks when I'd actually blocked a lunch break, and it was an hour. And most of the time I would do admin in that time. And then somebody would phone and I'd say, okay, well, you come at 1. And then somebody else would phone and say, okay, well, you come at 1:30. And then there's the lunch break gone, you know, squeeze 2 patients in. But I think it's for us to actually work on ourselves, to be able to say, like, it's okay to say no, because, you know, as hard as it is, you know, eventually it's going to be to your demise if you don't. And also I think that the rest of your patients suffer. If you're in this burnout or close to burnout, you're not working optimally. You can't heal animals feeling like that. And I think also, you know, I mean, when you and I started practice, it was a whole lot harder for us because we didn't have any colleagues to refer to. I think that we're in a better situation now, certainly in South Africa. And I know, though, in certain places, maybe in Europe, where there are very few vet rehabbers in certain countries, you might be in the same situation that we were in 2006 South African time, where when we couldn't see our patients, we didn't have anyone to refer to. And that was the hard part. You know, now it's nice to have people to refer to. And we've got this great South African WhatsApp group. And, you know, most of the conversations are, I can't see a patient, or there is a patient here who can see it. And somebody says, I can see it. Or somebody refers a colleague, you know, and says, so-and-so is in that area, they can see it, which is really great because it really helps share the load a little bit when you are so booked up and so busy.
Yeah. I mean, Megan, I think you make a lot of valid points, and boundaries are vital. Boundaries are part of self-love. So I see so many people that struggle with boundaries, and I obviously did struggle with them too. And still sometimes I struggle with boundaries. And I follow an American man called Matt Kahn. And one of the things he said about boundaries was, don't see boundaries as saying no to someone, but see boundaries as saying yes to yourself. So a boundary is there to enable you to be the best version of you that you can be. And that actually ties in with, when you're overworked and you're fatigued, you're actually not doing a good job. So, and what's your motivation? Why can't you put up a boundary? It goes a lot deeper than just saying put up a boundary. You have to understand why can't I say no? Is it a lack of self-worth? Is it because I don't have enough money, which means I'm not charging enough? Again, we come back to self-worth. We've got so many stories and things that we've grown up with and that we've been influenced by. And if there's anyone that's frustrated by saying, oh, just put up a boundary, I know that it's not easy, because the reason I've ended up in the situation similar to what you've described is because I had no boundary. And I've had to really look at myself and what is it that I struggle with, and what is it that motivates me, and why do I do these things? And it's been a lot of soul searching to get to a point where now I go, all right, I can only do this much, because if I do more, not only am I going to go into burnout, which is a really horrible place to be, but I'm not going to be serving those patients and those people that got me into this profession in the first place. I'm going to be doing them a disservice. So, we have this conversation, but it's so much deeper than we just stop burnout or we just put up a boundary, because we really do battle with that. As our conversation is showing, we block out the lunch break, but we don't take it or whatever else. Yeah.
Tanya, would you be happy to share what happened to you? I mean, when you had your burnout, when you said your hair was falling out, how long that took you to recover, so that the listeners that maybe you haven't experienced this are just aware of how bad it can get.
Okay, so I went to go and see when that all happened, I knew that I was in trouble. So I went to my GP. She said, no, you're in burnout, but you need to go and see an integrative endocrinologist. I went to go and see him. He did a whole lot of blood tests, made the diagnosis, gave me a whole lot of vitamins, and said, if you're not okay in 6 months, then come back and see me. I was so mad at his flippant response that I decided, that's it. I'm done with allopathic medicine. And I found a homeopath, the most amazing woman imaginable. And I went to go and see her. So she works on meridians and acupuncture and herbs and, also supplements, but caring. And when I saw her first appointment was 3 hours, she said to me, you are in deep trouble and I need to book you off for 3 months. I said, whoa, that is not going to happen, because my business will fold. I think I had one therapist helping me at the time, and there was no way, just trying to think, it was about 2013, 2014, where vet rehab in South Africa now really was starting, but there still weren't a lot of people and there were animals coming in. And I said, I can't do that. She said, okay, here's the deal. You will come to see me every week and I will get you back on track. So for the next 2 years, I went to see her every week. She lives in Bedford View. It's about a 40-minute drive from where I am. Traffic, 30 to 40, depending on traffic, one way. And then I had to come back. So she made me make the commitment to getting better. And I can say that I was released from her care after 2 years.
Sure.
It was a long process, and it might have been quicker if I had been in a position where I was willing to take off 3 months or able to. I mean, I say willing. At the time, my brain didn't allow me to. It wasn't feasible. She gave me intravenous drips every time I went there. I got piles of supplements and medicine. And I would say in the first 3 months, I also had to phone her. Like, it wasn't enough for me to just go once a week. I had to at least report in the middle of the week And she would ask me a whole lot of questions, and she would say, okay, and how are you sleeping? And what's happening? What's happening with your pain? And I mean, she was dedicated. And I think because she was so dedicated, I was dedicated. But it was a long road. It was a long road back to being able to actually even start to exercise again. I love exercise. It's one of my go-tos. So to not be physically able to do it, it was a tough time. It was a really, really hard time.
No, so thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's like pretty advanced kind of burnout. And I think I was completely unaware, even knowing you, that you were going through all of that. And I think that's the thing with burnout, is sometimes, there are people actually suffering from it, and we just think they're hard workers, right? That was, that's what if I think about other people that I've spoken to that have had it, I think, wow, they just work so hard. But they're people that are suffering. So what do you do now to prevent burnout? And what advice could you give to the vet rehabbers out there that are listening so that they don't go down the same path?
I think it's such a good question, and I don't want to be flippant about it. I think there's a few places to begin. So let's begin with what I think are the easy ones, and maybe not. So it depends on where you are. But what are your working hours? Do you get a real half a day off and not a 4:30 half day off? And what do you do with your time then? That's another conversation. But, so what are your demands within your workplace? Whether they're created by you or whether they're created by someone else, they need to be looked at. Are they sustainable is a good word. If you are employed, are you able to actually express yourself within that workplace? Or does your employer just go, listen, I don't care, do it? Because if you're not able to express yourself and live your values within your workplace, it's going to create a lot of stress. So you've got to do a little bit of, self-examination. What's happening in my workplace? So I mentor the young vets when they graduate, and they have to do a year of compulsory community service. And what I'm finding with a lot of them is they are too afraid to voice their discomfort, or the fact that they are not comfortable doing a procedure, or they don't want to do it, or they need help. And so it's important that you are in a workspace where you can actually voice your concerns or your discomforts or the things that you aren't happy doing, and also to be in a workspace that supports you. So you were speaking about, how you didn't realize that I was going through all of that, and you just thought I was a hard worker. And so it is important to be able to say, I'm in some trouble. Can you give me some space? And you you need the support, and you need the support outside of your workspace as well. So what is it that you are doing outside of your workspace that supports you to be the person that you really truly are? Because we cover a lot of that up because we think we have to fit in. So, those are perhaps easier things to tackle than to really look at myself. Now, I've had to really look at myself honestly, and honesty is really hard. And I've had to go, how am I contributing to this pattern? Because I did. And that's not a quick fix. So we look at things like self-care, like how much rest do I allow myself? I thought, maybe I go for a pedicure. I'm looking after my feet. That's great. But self-care is so much more than that. It's really giving myself permission to rest and to recuperate. So look at that. Look at how resilient are you within your mental space? And that comes back to, have I got support? What's my family situation like? What's my relationships like? Stay connected. That's another really important thing, and not just connected to people. I think that social media has done us a big disservice in some respects. But really, how many people do I know where I can honestly be myself and open up my heart and go, I'm struggling with this situation, and be connected to nature. So we've become disconnected from our outside world. And it's so full of gifts and joy, and it's so full of beauty and truth. Nature doesn't lie. Inside the sunflower seed is a sunflower that's destined to germinate and to bloom and to share its beauty and its individuality with the world. So we've got to start looking at what's inside us that we aren't sharing and that we're denying. Boundaries is a good one. So I think we've touched on that. Other things that we can look at is, how do I speak to myself? This is all about self-love. I have a very, very harsh inner critic. I can't even tell you some of the tones and the words that I use. And maybe as a perfectionist, you'll appreciate some of the ways in which you spoke to yourself. That doesn't help me. So I have to reprogram. I have to allow myself, I have to nurture myself and care for myself and go, okay, so the x-ray was lousy. All right, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to breathe for a minute, and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to reposition the dog. And this time it's going to be good. Instead of, you idiot, this is so basic. I mean, you can hear the difference. So there's a lot of self-investigation that goes into being able to overcome what you perceive as a difficult situation and to prevent burnout. Because if you're happy with yourself, a lot of these things are going to flow and you're going to be able to incorporate them and actually do them in your life.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, there's some great points there. One of the things you mentioned was being in nature. And in the beginning of our conversation, you said small animal vets are more likely to have burnouts. And I remember thinking it's because those equine and large animal people are out in nature. And that's exactly it, as you said now. Being out in nature helps, relieve your stress levels compared to being inside. And I remember in the days of working in the UK, you'd go indoors when it was dark and leave when it was dark, and you were just inside all the time. So yeah, going outside is definitely a help. What about the listeners now that have got practices like yourself and got other therapists? I mean, what do you put into place to protect the people that work for you, that they don't get burnout too?
Yeah, so as a practice owner, a few things, definitely shifts. I am aiming at practitioners working a 30-hour week. A normal office job is a 40-hour week. And according to the South African Veterinary Council, vets, it's okay for us to work 55 hours a week. I mean, that is ridiculous if you think about the emotional battering that we get all the time. So I'm working towards a 30-hour week. That does mean that we have to make some price adjustments, and we can't do it all in one go, to be able to still pay a livable wage, if we can put it that way. So I think that means that the hours are restricted, and whatever my therapists choose to do in their off time is up to them. So that's one aspect. The other aspect that I've implemented is we definitely have a lunch hour because we work shifts, but the reception staff and the admin staff are booked off between 1 and 2, or sometimes between 12 and 1. It depends on how the day works. I've created what we call a Zen zone. So it's a timeout space. It's a chill space. There's no conversations happen in there. There's a picnic spot outside for conversations. But inside the Zen zone, it's a quiet space. You can play quiet music. There's a lot of reading material in there if you want. There's a really, really comfortable couch. So you can go in there if you have a little bit of a break and you're feeling completely out of control. You can actually go in there, and we know it's a do not disturb. So we've created a Zen zone. I also, even before the pandemic, have instituted team building, and it's not team building rah rah yay. There's a lot of business techniques and training that happens there. So I think training is important. I mean, you need to make sure that your team is able to do the job. So as the business owner, you are responsible for training them. But what we also did a lot at the team building, so we go away for a long weekend once a year, and then we have Saturdays a couple of times through the year where we look at self-development. You know, what do you need? What skills do you need to manage your stress? What's not happening? Are you able to listen? So I think there's a lot of things that as a business owner, you can start to implement. And something that made a huge difference was weekly one-on-one meetings with my team, private meetings. So we have group meetings, but we also have one-on-one face-to-face time with the boss, if you like. But it's really about finding out where they're at and what do they need and what's not working and what is working. So it's not only about what's not working, it's about, okay, what's good? What successes did we have? Celebrate your successes. Huge. So there's actually lots, and you don't have to do everything all at once. You can just go, okay, what works for me?
Yeah, I love the idea of the one-on-ones. It's sort of like an appraisal system. So we have that online pet health too, where, I meet up with the team individually. We also have our weekly meetings, but meeting up with individuals on a regular basis, and we actually have a whole system. So it's a whole appraisal form where each team member actually fills in, and it's like exactly that. Like, what have my successes been this last 3 months? What are the things that I've struggled with? What can you, so on the form it says, what can online pet health do to help me to better my skills or to be able to do my job better? And then when I get together with them, it's like it's great. It's not like a interview type thing. It's literally like, a chat. It's like a chat with, somebody who is there looking out for them, and we chat about what worked, what didn't work, exactly like you said. So I think that appraisal system really works well, because I think that you can really pick up very quickly then, as an employer, you can pick up when somebody is struggling, if they're honest in the appraisal. And that's the thing, that you have to have that trust and that safe space, and that relationship, that they're prepared to be honest with you.
Yeah. And that as an employer, you need to be able to really look at the criticism and not take it personally.
Yeah.
So maybe some of it is aimed at you. Maybe you've got a really lousy temper, but sometimes it's just a system that needs to be adjusted to make it easier. So it's not a criticism leveled at you. It's simply a process to allow everything to run more smoothly and be better for everyone that's in the system.
Yeah, completely. So Tanya, let's think about somebody now who thinks, actually like picking up on a lot of what we've said now. And, I think I might be on this path to burnout. What steps should they take right now? What advice can you give them, and how they can handle the situation that they're in?
So I would suggest that they look at some of the things that we've mentioned in this podcast. How many of them can they introduce? So it does require a commitment. Let's say, I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day outside in nature, and I'm not going to take my phone with me, and I'm going to walk around the garden. So pick something that allows you to leave all of the stress behind and then commit to it. So find some practices that allow you to reduce the stress. If you are already in a state where your emotions are in trouble or your body is in trouble, I would definitely say you need to see a general practitioner, and you need to, get advice from a medical professional to assist you on a physical level. I have recently started a YouTube channel which has got it doesn't go in depth, but it does go into more detail than what I've actually mentioned in the podcast. So you can look for Life, the Universe, and Being a Veterinarian. And there are short videos there. Yeah, I think it's first about recognizing, and then it's about giving yourself permission to do something about it. And then it's about deciding, okay, what works for me? What am I going to do? And then start moving and then committing to that decision and moving down that pathway.
Great advice. And we'll put the link to Tanya's YouTube channel in the show notes, in the description for this podcast. One thing that I also want to share is that I use the app Calm. I don't know if you know it. Calm.
Okay.
And it's really great. It's like a meditation app. And, I'm not really good with meditating because my brain just continuously, is thinking about something else. So it's actually an app. It's got a whole lot of things. The main thing is meditation, but they've got like daily things. So I listen to something called the Daily J, and it's 7 minutes. It's Jay Chetty. I don't know if you know him. And it's 7 minutes basically every day. There is a little bit of a life lesson or something like where you look into yourself and the person that you are, and then a few minutes of just doing some meditating and just some breathing techniques. And I must say, for me, that is how I start my day. And it is really, really good. They've also got other sort of meditation where, let's say you're feeling particularly stressed and you're particularly wound up and you're feeling like it is that your heart's racing and you feel like you can't get a breath, where they have like 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, 5 minutes, you can choose how long, and it's a meditation basically just to calm yourself down. So if any of you are feeling like that, I hope that Calm app, you can just go into the App Store and download it. There's like a free version and a paid version, but very, very helpful to me, and I hope that it helps you guys too.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you. There's no formula. It's just what works for you.
Tanya, thank you so much. It's been great, as always, chatting to you. And I think we've really, really gone into this topic in depth. And I'm sure there's loads more to chat about. And I'm sure we'll have you on the podcast again for our 6th, 7th time. But from today, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. Thank you for yours. It's been most enjoyable as always. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. Now, don't forget to bookmark our next Vet Rehab Summit. This is on Friday the 10th and Saturday the 11th of November. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Onlinepethealth members, you get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com.